afternoon, sir. In this video, I will going to discuss the introduction and police and also the prosecution pillar. Um, Criminal justice encompasses a chain of events or activities, tasks or functions in accordance of response to perceived problems of law and order, which includes the following: the crime prevention and crime reduction. um, Talking about crime prevention para maiwasan natin ang mga krimen na mangyayari at at ma at mabawasan the arrest and prosecution of suspects, the hearing of criminal cases by the courts, sentencing, administration and enforcement of court orders, parole and other forms of license for prisoners, and work with offenders and ex-offenders in prison or in the community. Its determined vision is to provide the public an effective system or process in the community by which crimes are investigated and the persons suspected thereof are taken in custody, prosecuted in court, and punished and founded guilty, which provision being made for their correction and rehabilitation and to provide the people the ability to seek and obtain a remedy through formal or informal institutions, and in conformity with human rights standards. Laws are made in reaction or response to crime. Um, Nagagawa ang isang batas patay sa isang krimen. Obviously, crime comes first and not laws. Sa madaling sabi, nangyayari una ang isang krimen bago ang isang batas. So bago tayo gagawa ng krimen, pag-iisipan natin ng mabuti kung ano ang maidudulot nito or ano ang pananagutan natin sa batas. Maliit man o malaki ang gagawin natin ng krimen, ay may pananagutan tayo sa batas. Based in the Article 7 of Human Rights Act, it states that you cannot be charged with a criminal offense for an action that was not crime when you committed it. Dito sa artikulong ikapito sa karapatang pantao, sinasabi na hindi ito matatawag o hindi natin ito matatawag na krimen kung hindi pa natin ito nagagawa. There are 5 pillars of criminal justice system that represent us a tool to maintain peace and order. Meron limang haligi sa isang sa criminal justice na inirepresenta upang magagamit natin para mapanatili ang kapayapaan at katiwasayan ng ating bansa at para na rin maiwasan ang krimen. The highlights of this discussion are constantly focused on the specific or specified pillars that includes the beginning process of the system, which is law enforcement or police pillar. They enforce the law to prevent and control crime and prevent the anatomy of crime. Sa dito sa aking discussion ay may dalawang sistema. Ito ay tinatawag na law enforcement or police pillar. Dito ipinapatupad dito ipinapatupad ang batas o para matulungan tayo makontrol ang mga krimen na dapat nating iwasan or or dapat nating gawin, in which they can prevent crimes just by their presence. The first stage pertains to police activities, the initial investigation of crimes reported to or discovered by police authorities. So una ay police activities. The initial investigation of crimes. O, dito iniimbestigahan ng isang pulis ang isang krimen na i-report para malaman kung sino ang may sala o sino ang may gawa ng isang krimen. It consists thorough implementation in the prevention of control of crimes. Crimes, law enforcement, and the effect the arrest of offenders, including the conduct of lawful searches and seizures to gather necessary evidence so that a complaint may be filed with a prosecutor's office. The key strategies for the entire law enforcement pillar includes strengthening and upscaling interpillar and coordination, institutional strengthening of the structure on crime prevention, sustaining active community engagement in crime prevention, having a prudent spread or reach of information dissemination and advocacy, and also the support of CGS reforms. The law enforcement pillar's core, the objective of this is to have an adequate resources through increase in budget allocation and the implementation of a transformation program that upholds meritocracy and undertakes policy review as essential input to the decision-making process. Coordination between law enforcement and agency is also something that is much left undone. Ideally, each law each law enforcement agency could be able to easily tap information from one another in monitoring crimes and movement of criminals. In order in order to have the necessary coordination to completely dominate the crimes and implant a consist peace and prosperity all throughout. Therefore, the law enforcement agencies, particularly the PNP or the Philippine National Police, must coordinate with local government units and set out clear definition of its role in local law enforcement. So, so the prosecutor's primary function is to initiate and conduct criminal action, to act as a party in judicial proceedings, and in many countries, to supervise and direct to the police during the investigative phase. According to Davis, 2005, it is considered as the most powerful pillar in the criminal justice system, where they control the direction and outcome of all criminal cases. Ayon kay Davis, may tawag nating isang makapangyarihan na haligi ay ang criminal justice system. Dahil may ano dito na nai-control or dito na nalalaman kung ano ang kalalabasan ng isang krimen. Particularly through their charging and plea bargaining decisions. It has a wide range of discretion in determining what charges to bring and to prosecution. Prosecution pillar is in control at this stage, even in jurisdictions where grand juries investigate and bring charges through the indictment process. Moreover, the essence of control over the entire system and decide whether to charge an individual with a crime offense are one of the determining factors that made this pillar dominates the majority of CGS or the criminal justice system. While the charging decision is critical because it determines whether a person will face criminal charges and ultimately risk and loss of liberty. The increase in mandatory minimum of the sentences and longer prison terms has decreased the importance of plea bargaining process because there are risks associated with exercising one's constitutional right to a trial as a result of becoming too high or impossible to minimize the sentences. Therefore, the mandatory minimum sentencing laws and sentencing guidelines that require judges to impose a specific sentence based on limited charge-based information. Prosecutors initially predetermine the outcome of many cases. The prosecution pillar course objective is to have a well-managed case flows process achieved through adequate training and well-compensated prosecutors. The training of the police is to enhance investigative capability and improve coordination with the police, as well as to enable wide and fitter discretion that entitle them to exert more power and control in criminal process than any other criminal justice officials. The decision they make, particularly in charging a plea bargaining stages of the process, often determine the outcomes of criminal cases and have monumental consequences for criminals, defendants, and crime victims alike. Hence, the primary concern for the prosecution pillar is to serve personnel deficiency, considering the lawyers are involved in the prosecution of offenses. The deficiency hinders the ability of the prosecution pillar to effectively deliver services in their clients. Personal deficiency adds to the growing problem of court congestion, with the number of cases handled by prosecutors, for instance. They are sometimes forced to ask continuance. This resort This results in delay in the disposition of cases. Furthermore, the number of lawyers' case load affect his or her performance. Indeed, the more cases are handled by a single lawyer, the less attention is given to individual cases. Uh, this sometimes leads to the disseminal of cases due to technicalities. Moreover, despite of this scarcity in its own pillar of criminal justice system or the CGS, the prosecution pillar constantly observe balance, mandatory and effectively preventing corruption. It its plans and programs are also involving as well as the proactives, for they are reiterations of the activities, projects, and policies that are already in place to lack of funding to pursue their programs. The lack of funding to pursue their program should not be used as an excuse not to deliver basic services, given the limited resources. The institution must learn how to work with the resources available to them. Significantly, the current administration advocates change from within. The government must realize how that a simple directive in a document will not automatically translate into good governance. Support is necessary to strengthen institutions and instrumentalities. The prosecution and the police pillars function is great need of reform. Even though most of these law enforcement officials perform their duties legally and ethically, their practices and policies often produce unjust results. As public servants, all pillars should have a great interest in uncovering inequalities and eliminating disparate treatment of similarly situated criminal defendants and crime victims, or by creating more transparency in the charging of plea bargaining process. informing their constituents of their practices and policies, and taking steps to eliminate race and class inequalities, where the five pillars would go a long way towards restoring fairness and balance of the power in the Philippine criminal justice law. So this is the importance of introduction, the police, and the prosecution pillar. Mm. It will help us to prevent crime. So the critical element in implying verdict to an innocent person obscures under the system of jury trial, which serve not only as truth-seeking mechanism and a means of achieving fairness. According to Thomas Jefferson, that I consider trial by jury as the only anchor yet imagined by man, by which a government can be held to the principles of its constitution, and it varies the idea that judiciary is a supreme entity that can impale the majority of crimes and control the justice that is easily overthrown by powerful people enslaved by money, injustice, and insolence. Sa madaling sabi, batay dito sa aking dinidiscuss, ang kritikal na elemento sa pagpapahiwatig ng hatol sa isang inosenteng tao ay naiikubli sa ilalim ng sistema ng paglilitis ng hurado na nagsilbing hindi lamang sa isang mekanismo sa paghahanap ng katotohanan at isang paraan ng paggamit ng pagiging antas. Ayon nga kay Thomas Jefferson, itinuturing ko ang paglilitis ng hurado bilang isang angkla na naisip ng isang tao kung saan ang isang pamahalaan ay maaaring mahawakan sa mga prinsipyo ng konstitusyong nito. So, nag-iiba-iba ang ideya ng hudikatura. Sa isang pinakamataas na entidad na maaaring ipako ang karamihan ng mga krimen at kontrolin ang hustisya na madaling ibagsak ng mga makakapangyarihang tao. Tulad na lang yung mga taong nasa itaas, yung mga taong nasa gobyerno na may hawak o kaya nilang bilhin ang batas. Kaya nilang bilhin ng kanilang malalaking pera ang batas. Na isinasabi dito, kayang kontrolin ang hustisya ng at madaling ibagsak ng mga makakapangyarihang tao na inalipin ng pera, kawalang katarungan at kabastusan. Sasabihin natin, aalapinin, tulad na lang yung isa kang mayaman at ikaw ay nagkasalang pumatay, nagkasalang nagnakaw ng malaking halaga. Dahil sa pera, pwede mong baliktarin at pwede mong mapawalang bisa ang kasalanan na iyong ginawa at pwede mong ipataw doon sa taong inosente. Inosente mangmang ay magkaparehas. Inosente, walang pera, walang makain, mahirap. Ikaw na mayaman at maraming pera, pwede mong ilagay sa kanya yung bahid yung dumi na nakabahid sa iyo, pwede mong ilagay sa kanya dahil ikaw ay may karapatan or ikaw ay nasa sayo na yun. Ikaw ay meron malaking pera na pwede mong bayaran ng batas upang baliktarin. Ikaw na may kasalanan, ang iyong kasalanan na nagawa ay i-frame up mo sa taong walang kasalanan. Yun ang nagagawa ng pera sa malalaking tao na walang mga utak. So, in my own accord, it is unjust to convict an innocent people and fathom their innocence that enables to incarcerate them for the crimes that never happened. I realize that I am a voice crying in wilderness, but I believe that the innocent are convicted far more frequently than the public cares to believe, and far more frequently than those who operate the system dare to believe. There are many cases that innocents are wrongly accused by people who stamp justice by their own foot because of power. Dito sinasabi, napakamaraming kaso na nagagawa o na nangyayari na inaakusahan yung inosenteng tao sa kasalanang hindi na nagawa. Diba? nangyayari ito sa kapanahunan natin ngayon. Nang dahil sa pera, nang dahil sa kapangyarihan, dun, dun kinukuha ng mga malalaking tao ang kanilang, dun kinukuha ang kapangyarihan upang mapawalang bisa ang kasalanang nagawa nila or upang mapawalang sala sila. Innocents are wrongly accused by people who stamp justice by their own foot because of power, knowledge, and connection. Nang dahil sa kapangyarihan, nang dahil sa mga dignidad or dahil sa natapos at connection. The generation of unfair, ang henerasyon ng pagiging hindi patas. Unfair verdicts and prejudice should not be tolerated any further because it will worsen the justice created by worthy selected government officials. Dito sinasabi, sa nakikita natin ngayon sa ating panahon, dito sinasabi natin na nagagawa ng mga malalaking tao ang kanilang gawain na mapawalang bisa ang kanilang sarili sa mga kasalanang nagawa nila lang dahil sa pera, kapangyarihan. Oo nga, nangyayari yan ngayon. And in life, we can choose our pathways to have a better tomorrow and strive hard to achieve our goals. As for me, I choose to be great judicial officer that will use the law and justice as a morally correct manner, and as a future protector of this nation, I will promise and do my best to be bearer that suits the pride of the service in avoiding such dilemma to happen. According to Voltaire, it is better to run the risk of sparing the guilty than to condemn the innocent. Thank you.